by Mike Hall, the director of the Ithaca Tompkins International Airport. Now, Mike, how has the outbreak of the COVID-19 case affected the airport here in Ithaca?
Well, it's not just the Ithaca Airport, it's the entire air transportation system. We were up 10% year over year in January and February. And of course, we have our new terminal online at Ithaca. And then March, about spring break time or halfway through March, we stayed at a very high level of traffic, and then it just stopped. And nationwide, air traffic is down in excess of 90%. And you know, we're part of a system, so that's true of all airports. I think we were down 2% less than, but that's nothing. And so, you know, we still have service. The federal stimulus package involved paying the airlines to continue to fly to the communities that they were serving before the pandemic arrived. That's really important because it keeps the station alive. It keeps employees employed, and it allows you to ramp up again once the circumstances allow. But right now, we are very, very quiet and also very clean.
Got it. And we'll just go on to the next question then. What were the plans for the customs facility pre-COVID-19?
Well, the customs facility was finished at the end of the year, construction. But there's a lot more to the facility than just construction. There's a lot of electronic equipment that has to be installed because you have to scan arriving passengers, much as you do with TSA. You know, when you depart from the airport, you're actually arriving in the States. So that equipment's being installed. There are some agreements that had to be signed and put in place. That's being worked on, and things like agricultural permit. If you come to Ithaca and you have garbage to dispose of, you don't want Mediterranean fruit flies introduced into New York. So there's a very stringent procedure for dealing with any waste that comes in the airplane. And finally, a lot of live animals come to Cornell University Vet College from everywhere in the world for treatment. And so we want to be able to receive those patients through the customs facility. When you add all that up, we're going to be ready to open in July. The question becomes whether the country's open in July. So I think that the two things we're looking at right now are finishing the capability of customs, number one, and then two, finding the appropriate time to allow for international arrivals directly into the community.
Got it. And what is everyday operations kind of looking like now with everything going on? You mentioned that you're trying to keep the airport very clean as possible.
Well, we're lucky. You know, the terminal's brand new, and in its new iteration, it's much easier to clean. So as a public space goes, we're about as clean as you can find. A lot of flat surfaces, a lot of flat screen, interactive devices and what have you, which are easier to wipe down than what might have been there previously. So we're clean, and we're just at a very low ops tempo right now. A lot of flights have canceled, although we still have service from each of our 3 airline partners. Obviously, you know, they're flying airplanes sometimes with 1 or 2 people on them. The only people who are traveling right now are people with really compelling reasons to travel. You know, maybe a very serious family emergency someplace that you need to get to and, you know, to help out. But it's obviously not the time that you grab the family and just take off on a vacation. So we're expecting that this peak will pass in the next month or so, and that, you know, we're going to start an uptick in the 3rd quarter, which is July, August, and September. A big key will be whether or not Ithaca College and Cornell resume in-resident instruction. Not because so much of our travel is student travel, although a good deal of it is student travel, but that kind of brings the heartbeat back to the community. And so we're preparing to ramp up in the 3rd quarter, and we're hoping that by the end of the year, for a variety of reasons, society has become more normal. Travel levels are back up, and we become a place that you're very comfortable traveling to and from because of three things: we're convenient, clean, and connected.
Mhm. And what do you see for the future of the airport, especially with all the renovations and the time and the planning that has gone into making it now an international airport and renovating it? Where do you see the future of the airport going after all this ends?
Well, I think our future is very bright. We're going to recover to a new normal. It will never be quite the same as it was. The good news for us is that we had a several decade old facility that's been completely renovated and remodeled. So we've taken care of the capital basis of the airport very nicely. And believe me, if we hadn't been able to do it when we did it, now's not the time you're going to get to do it. So we got a good base. The second thing is that we remain a globally connected community. In fact, Ithaca really is more valuable coming out of this pandemic than it was going into this pandemic. The two most diverse communities in New York State, Queens and Tompkins. And, we're coming into a time when there's a real focus on isolation, personal isolation, state isolation, national isolation. And you would think that being globally connected is not such a big deal. But the fact is, across the entire world, there are many people who would like to have the opportunity we have here in the United States, who would like to visit here, who would like to learn here, who would like to invest here. And there are far fewer welcoming communities today than there were a couple months ago. So when we say we speak your language, we cook your food, we celebrate your music, you're welcome here, we mean that. And I think that the greatest advantage that the broader Ithaca community has going forward is inclusion, because inclusion is going to be a more scarce, therefore more precious value for a community to have, and it will be attractive. And I believe that we will continue to be globally connected as we have been in the past, and that eventually that will spread. The longer term outlook for the world, we're all on one planet, and we know that it seems a lot smaller than it did several hundred years ago because of the interconnection that we have, and that's going to come back. But it's going to come back gradually, just like air service is going to come back gradually. This has been a real shot in the nose for the economy and people's health and everything else, and it'll take a while to recover. But I think we're very well positioned to do that. And in fact, we're choosing to look at this as an opportunity. It's not an opportunity we sought. It's an opportunity we could surely have done without. But the fact is, we didn't have that choice. So given what's happened, are you going to be able to make something out of it, or are you just going to sit back and feel sorry for yourself? And our position is we're going to work as hard as we can to make something out of it. And instead of incrementally going to the airlines and saying, gee, could you take us to Kennedy Airport? Now we're going to be able to go in and say, look, the whole system's been torn apart. Now you got to put it back together. Humpty's got to come back together again. When we put Humpty back together again, let's look at something different than we had before, something that's of greater advantage to our community, to our business, and to your business. Working together, there's a better place for us to go. But again, if there's one value that I want to keep emphasizing through all this, it's inclusion. When you're welcome here, we have the kind of community that we can be, and that's a very special community.
One last question for you, just kind of on a personal note. How do you see perhaps airports changing after this pandemic in regards to sanitary measures?
Well, I think you're going to see a lot of that, a greater emphasis. And one of the other things that's important about this pandemic is that every year, a lot of people get colds, a lot of people get the flu, and a lot of people who have other issues die of the flu. And this is a more severe viral disease than the annual flu. But the same precautions that you're hearing on a daily basis apply to all viral diseases. Wash your hands, try not to touch your face, keep some distance from people that are coughing, and wear a mask if you're not feeling well yourself. All those things are are good procedures to take, in the future. Now, I think in terms of airports, we have a relatively clean and spacious airport. So coming in and out of Ithaca is going to be a safer, better experience than some of the, you fill in the blank, way crowded hubs are. And so I think our air traffic will pick up here back to the pre-pandemic level. We'll do everything we can at the airport, including probably providing masks for people that don't have them. And then I think you're going to see one other thing. I'll be very surprised if part of screening doesn't become taking your temperature. The other day I was at a medical visit, and they just pointed this gun at my forehead, and they didn't have to stick anything in my ear or anyplace else, and they had my temperature. A device like that is readily adaptable to screening, and so it wouldn't surprise me a bit, especially until we get a vaccine, if as part of the screening process to get on board the airplane, somebody didn't take a shot of your forehead and say, whoops, you've got a fever of 102, you're not going to get on the airplane. The other thing is that the airlines themselves have done a remarkable job of cleaning the aircraft, if you will. In the days since you were able to smoke on aircraft, the filters in the aircraft air conditioning system have improved significantly. They're all HEPA filters now. And so, the air inside the airplane is pretty clean. The surfaces are wiped down regularly. If somebody's not actively sick sitting next to you, it's a pretty safe way to travel. It's certainly a lot safer than other public transportation modes that don't get the kind of intense treatment that aviation does. So I think aviation will be a safe way to travel coming out of the pandemic, and I think we'll rise back up to the kinds of air traffic levels. It might take 18 months, but we're headed back there.
Right. Mark, anything else you want to ask? Or Mike, is there anything else you want to mention?
Not on my end. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think the only thing I would mention in closing is how much we miss the richness of the community that comes from Ithaca College and Cornell and Cortland and Wells. And, we're very fortunate to live in the kind of community where there are always fresh new ideas and perspectives and interesting people that come here and share with us their culture and their wisdom. And I'm very much looking forward to the excitement of having your colleagues back in the community, because it makes it a lot more interesting place to live. And I would not choose to live anywhere except here in Ithaca.